Thanks for making KRTV your choice for local news on this Monday. I'm Shannon New.
And I'm Tim McGonigal. We begin in the courtroom. Defense attorneys in a 19-year-old murder case continued calling witnesses today in Fort Benton as their case nears its end.
Thomas Jaraczeski is accused of fatally shooting Geraldine veterinarian Brian Ryan in July of 1996. MTN's Joe Huizinga was in the courtroom today and joins us with today's testimony.
Today, Thomas Jaraczeski's defense team focused heavily on trying to discredit the state's timeline of Brian Ryan's death. According to the state, Ryan was killed Friday night on July 13th. Two witnesses testified to seeing Ryan eat a steak dinner that night, but during Ryan's autopsy, no steak was found in his stomach. A forensic pathologist says this makes it very unlikely that Ryan died Friday night.
So the gastric emptying rate appears to make the concept that he was shot and killed late Friday night not valid.
My opinion is that it doesn't seem like a plausible time of death.
In the afternoon, the defense focused on Jaraczeski's whereabouts. According to testimony given by several family members, Jaraczeski was only unaccounted for that Friday night. The defense also called a friend of Ryan's who says they have repeatedly referenced as a possible suspect during his testimony. Many of his answers seem to contradict what others have previously testified to in the case. While he has an alibi for the time the investigators say Ryan was killed, he does not, however, have an alibi for the Saturday when the defense says the crime happened. Testimony in the case could come to a close as soon as tomorrow. We'll bring you updates. Tim and Shannon.
All right, thanks, Joe. Again, we'll continue to follow that case. We have an update for you now on a deadly crash Saturday near Box Elder.
The identity of the two victims has been released, according to the Hill County Sheriff's Office. They're 23-year-old Rylan Faye Aline Burns of Rocky Boy and 26-year-old Leandra Thomas of Hayes. According to the Montana Highway Patrol, the incident happened around 4:30 Saturday morning. MHP says the two died after the vehicle they were in was struck by an oncoming vehicle crossing the center line. The other passenger in that vehicle was taken to Northern Montana Hospital in Havre with minor injuries. The driver of the oncoming vehicle was also taken to Northern Montana Hospital with injuries.
Every year, Montana Farmers Union joins the other national farmers unions states with a fly-in to Washington, D.C. to discuss with Congress issues. They do one in the spring, another in the fall. This year, the main issue was focused on country of origin labeling, which requires cuts of meat and some fruits and vegetables be labeled with their country of origin. Despite its widespread popularity among consumers and American producers, a dispute with Canada and Mexico at the World Trade Organization and subsequent retaliatory threats from these countries have forced Congress's hand into choosing between changing the law or facing potential tariffs from their trading partners.
We believe that Montanans and all consumers want to know where their food comes from, and by labeling it, they know where it was born, raised, and slaughtered. The issue with the fair trade issue and the World Trade Organization is the simple fact that both Canada and Mexico have indicated that they have lost a great deal of money because of the labeling issue in the United States. The WTO
Christians was one of a dozen Montana Farmers Union members and staffers who made the trip last week.
Pope Francis is making a historical stop in the United States. After visiting Cuba, the Pope will meet with politicians and greet the American public during his 6-day visit throughout the Northeast.
MTN's Zach Briggs sat down with the Diocese of Helena's Bishop George Leo Thomas, who shared his views on the Pope's arrival before flying out to Washington, D.C. tomorrow.
The Bishop of Rome, Pope Francis, set to visit with the American people come Tuesday, a historic time for the U.S. and the Catholic community. His first stop, the White House, where he'll convene with President Obama for a welcoming ceremony, followed by a parade, then prayer with over 200 bishops from across the country. The Bishop of Helena, George Leo Thomas, having met with the previous two pontiffs, also looking forward to Pope Francis's arrival, describing him as one with a common touch.
Pope Francis, he's just a very different kind of a man, exudes compassion and accessibility, a little bit of a mischievous sense of humor.
The former Bishop of Buenos Aires on board to address the U.S. Congress and United Nations. Mitigating climate change and opening America's doors to immigrants, two issues he's expected to bring before lawmakers and world leaders this week. Bishop Thomas calling him a rather progressive pope.
I think he is probably moving the margins a bit. I mean, some of the things he's done most recently on the marriage annulment process, the absolution regarding abortion. He's bringing people together, and his big emphasis is dialogue over diatribe.
From D.C. to New York to Philadelphia, Bishop Thomas hoping Pope Francis's American tour resonates with dioceses throughout the nation, providing guidance for migrants and the poor.
Montana's a long way from Tipperary, shall we say, but we have got people here who live in the quiet margins. They live in the shadows. I think that we also have to locally be called to action.
A call to action amplified by the leader of the Roman Catholic Church, whose visit is expected to attract the attention of millions from around the globe. Reporting in Helena, Zach Briggs, MTN News.
One of the lawmakers who contributed to the Capitol's rich history has passed away. Legislator Dan Harrington has died. Harrington served as a Democrat for 30 years with the Montana legislature from 1977 through 2007 and was also a delegate during the 1972 Montana Constitutional Convention. Friends remember the lifelong Butte resident as a champion of the little people.
A champion of the little people. He was a champion of the people. He never ever took his values and sold them down the river to anybody with moneyed interests or power.
Dan Harrington was 77 years old. Well, Montana's Capitol complex includes buildings and other items that help tell the story of Montana's history.
And this weekend, the area was nominated for recognition on the National Register of Historic Places. MTN's Sanjay Talwani has more.
It's had special meaning for Montanans for more than a century.
I fell in love with this area when I drove on a bus from Butte with my 6th grade civics class, and I've remained in love with this area for a long, long time.
And it's not just the seat of Montana's political power.
I think for a lot of us in Montana, when we come to Helena, we think of the Capitol as a single building rather than an entire complex.
The nomination includes 15 buildings and a dozen other items.
So what this does is it really opens up the eyes for everyone in the state to see there's so much history here in the entire Capitol complex area.
Some of the buildings have served different purposes over the years, like this Capitol Annex.
That was a restaurant to serve the people that would come to the Capitol.
It later became the first headquarters of the Montana Highway Patrol. Other items tell different parts of the Montana story.
We have the beginnings of Montana statehood documented all the way through the 20th century. And the processes of the 20th century, from the Great Depression to World War II to the development of a new constitution for the state in 1972, is all reflected in the architecture here.
If the National Park Service approves the designation, the main effect will be greater recognition.
It's really about education and celebration.
And I am guessing that there are many tourists that this is what they do. They look at places that are on the National Historic Register.
The Park Service could make a decision by the end of the year. At the Capitol, Sanjay Talwani, MTN News.
Coming up.